Piranha, 1978. Joe Dante's Piranha arrived at the tail end of the 70s monster movie craze, yet it managed to distinguish itself by being far smarter and far meaner than the blockbuster it was intended to spoof. While it clearly positions itself as a Jaws ripoff, the film functions more like a subversive, darkly comedic critique of the very tropes it occupies. A government experiment gone wrong unleashes a school of genetically modified, hyper-aggressive fish into a summer resort river, turning a mundane vacation spot into a chaotic, red-tinted aquatic slaughterhouse. The film excels because of its tone, which sits perfectly in the uncomfortable space between satire and genuine tension. Dante treats the small-town bureaucracy and the oblivious vacationers with a sharp, cynical wit, making the eventual arrival of the fish feel like a chaotic, well-deserved punchline. Practical effects, which rely on clever editing, fast-paced camera work, and the occasional rubber puppet, create a frenetic, overwhelming sense of danger that feels grounded in the tangible reality of the 70s exploitation aesthetic. Looking back, it remains a quintessential example of how a director can turn a limited budget into an asset by leaning into humor and technical ingenuity. It doesn't attempt to be profound, nor does it try to emulate the high-stakes drama of Spielberg. Instead, it offers a fast, nasty, and endlessly entertaining ride that refuses to take its own premise seriously for even a second. For those who appreciate the intersection of genre awareness and visceral, old-school creature effects, this stands as a gold standard for the nature runs amok subgenre. Dogs, 1976. Trapped at the tail end of the 70s nature runs amok craze, this film ditches radioactive mutations for a more unsettling, grounded threat. Packs of domestic dogs organizing to systematically hunt their human masters. Set in a secluded university town, the production avoids the campy trappings of its peers, opting instead for a cold, clinical depiction of survival. It forces an uncomfortable realization upon the viewer that our most loyal companions are capable of calculated lethal coordination when the natural order is disrupted. Brinkerhoff's direction relies on restraint. He avoids the urge to make the canines monstrous through prosthetics or gore. Instead, he leverages rhythmic editing and an abrasive, discordant score to turn mundane barking and trotting into instruments of terror. The horror stems entirely from the subversion of the man's best friend trope. As residents are picked off, the town is stripped of its suburban comfort, revealing a predatory world lurking just beneath the surface of the manicured lawn. It is a bleak, stripped-down thriller that feels remarkably cynical. While it lacks the high-gloss polish of big-budget creature features, its gritty, no-nonsense approach to the premise makes it far more effective and memorable than many of its flashier, more conventional counterparts. Day of the Animals, 1977. High in the mountains, a group of hikers signs up for fresh air and weekend adventure, only to find the wilderness no longer playing by the rules. With the ozone thinning overhead and tempers fraying on the trail, nature starts pushing back, patient, relentless, and everywhere at once. The setup is lean, a mixed bag of personalities, a guide who's seen too much, and a storm front of bad decisions. When the first attack hits, it feels like a fluke. When the second comes, it feels like a pattern. Soon it's clear, predators and prey have swapped places, and the forest is calling the shots. The suspense comes from distance closing, the way quiet tree lines turn into eyes, the way a clearing stops feeling safe, the way night brings the soundscapes right up to your ear. Performances lean into survival tension. Fragile egos, stubborn pride, flashes of bravery that arrive a step too late. The filmmaking favors real locations and the unpredictability of animals, trading slick choreography for a rough, immersive texture. You feel wind, rain, and altitude in the framing. By the time the group is whittled down to desperate choices, the movie has made its case. When the balance tips, it tips fast. It's man versus nature done with blunt force, a rugged slice of 70s eco-horror where the trail map won't help, and the ridgeline is just another line you can't hold. Ants, 1977. Ants, also distributed under the title It Happened at Lakewood Manor, stands as a prime example of the disaster horror hybrid that dominated the 1970s television landscape. The premise is stripped down and ruthlessly effective. A construction crew accidentally disturbs a colony of radioactive ants, which promptly descend upon a swanky, isolated resort hotel. As the insects swarm the trapped vacationers, the narrative pivots from a standard social drama into a high-stakes survival struggle, transforming the most mundane household pest into an unstoppable, flesh-eating menace that renders traditional barricades and weapons utterly useless. Unlike the splashier creature features of the era, the film leans heavily into the claustrophobic anxiety of its trapped-in-a-building setting. The tension is generated not through expensive or elaborate animatronics, but through the panicked, increasingly desperate reactions of the ensemble cast. It serves as a masterclass in low-budget efficiency, utilizing real insects and frantic, tight editing to cultivate a genuine sense of creeping scale and dread. These practical limitations actually bolster the viewing experience, providing a gritty, real-time atmosphere that makes the encroaching biological catastrophe feel disturbingly tangible and immediate. For the modern audience, this production acts as a vivid time capsule of the decade's television movie boom. It captures a specific breezy yet surprisingly nasty tone, where a luxurious getaway can be transformed into a charnel house by the afternoon. While it lacks the high-gloss terror of major theatrical releases, it succeeds precisely because it never winks at the viewer. It treats its ludicrous premise with total deadly seriousness. It remains a lean, aggressive, and thoroughly entertaining slice of 1970s television horror that serves as a grim reminder that sometimes the smallest, most ignored threats are the most effective. If you're enjoying the video so far, take a second to like and subscribe, and let us know your favorite in the comments. Now, let's keep going. Frogs, 1972. Nature finally has enough. That's the entire elevator pitch for Frogs, a high-concept eco-horror flick where the local wildlife decides to systematically dismantle a wealthy, arrogant family during their 4th of July weekend at a private island estate. The title is a bit of a misnomer, though. While the frogs are the generals of this reptilian uprising, they mostly just sit around looking judgmental while snakes, lizards, spiders, and turtles do all the heavy lifting. It's a classic case of the nature strikes back subgenre, but it lacks the chaotic swarming you might expect. Instead, the pacing is oddly deliberate, focusing on the slow, methodical elimination of a group of characters who are largely unlikable. Ray Milland plays the family patriarch, a man whose sheer stubbornness makes you almost root for the toads. The film is undeniably cheesy, leaning hard into a metaphor for environmental pollution that feels about as subtle as a sledgehammer. But there is something strangely compelling about watching a group of people being terrorized by creatures that are realistically, well, just hanging out. It's not a film that will keep you up at night with scares, but it is a quintessential creature feature time capsule. If you can handle a slower burn and appreciate the sheer audacity of a film, Frogs is a weird, memorable slice of 70s trash horror history. Grizzly, 1976. Following the massive cultural footprint of Jaws, every producer in Hollywood scrambled to replicate the formula with a different apex predator. William Girdler's Grizzly is perhaps the most unabashedly forest-bound riff on that phenomenon. Set in a national park, the film pits a heroic ranger against an 18-foot-tall, man-eating grizzly bear that has decided the local campers are its primary food source. It is loud, aggressive, and features a surprising amount of carnage for a creature feature of its time. The film leans into the slasher-in-the-woods aesthetic before the genre was even fully codified. By turning the bear into a deliberate, almost sadistic antagonist, Girdler manages to create a genuine sense of threat that elevates it above the usual made-for-TV fare of the decade. The practical effects are gruesome, leaning heavily on the splatter sensibilities that were bubbling up in the independent horror scene, and Christopher George brings a weary, blue-collar grit to the lead role that gives the film a surprisingly solid emotional foundation. While it is undeniably derivative, Grizzly holds up as a piece of high-octane entertainment because it never pauses to apologize for its own absurdity. It's a fast-paced, nasty, and thoroughly satisfying romp that understands exactly what the audience wants. Big kills, high stakes, and a bear that feels like a legitimate horror movie monster. It is an essential, if unrefined, milestone in the nature runs amok boom of the 70s, serving as the perfect companion to the decade's obsession with turning the great outdoors into a lethal playground. The Food of the Gods, 1976. Nature fights back in this gloriously chaotic slice of 1970s eco-horror, where science meddles with evolution and pays the price. Deep in the wilderness of British Columbia, a mysterious milky substance bubbles up from the earth. When animals feed on it, they grow. Not just large, but monstrously oversized. Soon, rats the size of wolves and wasps with wingspans like eagles are turning the quiet countryside into a war zone. Loosely inspired by H.G. Wells's novel, The Food of the Gods delivers everything one could hope for from drive-in creature cinema: miniature sets, rubbery effects, and sheer enthusiasm. Director Burt I. Gordon, known to fans as Mr. B.I.G., stages the chaos with endearing earnestness, filling every frame with practical ingenuity and old-fashioned spectacle. The giant animal attacks may look dated now, but their handmade quality gives the film a strange, enduring charm. Marjoe Gortner leads the cast with straight-faced seriousness that only makes the madness more entertaining. What makes the movie fun is its total lack of cynicism. It believes in its premise completely. Behind the pulpy thrills, there's even a faint ecological warning, a sense that nature's revenge might be well earned. It's messy, loud, and completely unrestrained, the kind of film that defined weekend rentals and late-night marathons. The Food of the Gods may not be elegant, but it's a perfect time capsule of 1970s creature feature excess, where every swarm, squeal, and explosion feels like the end of the world. Tentacles, 1977. Tentacles stands as a quintessential example of the nature-gone amok subgenre that flooded cinemas in the wake of Jaws. Directed by Ovidio G. Assanitis, this Italian-American co-production shifts the threat from the Atlantic coast to the seaside of California, where a massive prehistoric octopus begins terrorizing a community after a local tunnel construction project uses unauthorized frequencies that disturb the creature's environment. It is a film that leans heavily into the environmental horror craze of the 70s, attempting to blend high-stakes disaster thrills with the creature feature blueprint. What makes the film a curious outlier is its surprisingly starry cast, including John Huston, Shelley Winters, and Henry Fonda, all of whom seem slightly bewildered to be appearing in a movie where the primary antagonist is a giant rubber tentacle. The film's pacing is notoriously erratic, alternating between standard disaster movie procedural scenes and genuinely strange underwater sequences that prioritize a dreamlike, if sometimes unintentional, absurdity. It lacks the lean, focused suspense of Spielberg's shark classic, opting instead for a sprawling, disjointed narrative that feels as sprawling and mysterious as the ocean depths themselves. While Tentacles is often remembered for its bizarre casting and its status as a knockoff blockbuster, it maintains a certain charm for fans of 70s exploitation. Its practical effects, while inconsistent, have a tangible, old-school feel that stands in stark contrast to the CGI-driven monster movies of today. For viewers interested in the global ripple effect of the 1975 Jaws phenomenon and the peculiar, often star-studded attempts to capitalize on it, this film is a fascinating, if imperfect, relic of the decade's obsession with aquatic terrors. Long Weekend, 1978. If you're ready for horror that creeps up slowly, scratches at your unease, and takes a dramatic turn when you least expect it, Long Weekend is a late 70s gem that grabs you with its quiet dread. It's Australia's take on ecological horror, a marriage in need of repair, and a wilderness that seems ready to strike back. The story follows Peter and Marcia, a bickering couple driving out of the city in hopes that a camping trip might patch things up. But from the start, their actions rub against the natural world. They litter, destroy, and lash out with thoughtless cruelty, unaware that their surroundings are watching and waiting. The tension doesn't come from traditional jump scares, but from the unnerving sense that every tree, every wave, every animal in the bush has turned against them. The coastal landscapes are shot in ways that make nature feel alive and hostile: sweeping beaches, dark forests, and the eerie presence of a dugong corpse that seems to inch closer each time it appears. The sound design only adds to the unease. Bird calls, rustling branches, and strange cries echo in the distance, transforming the ordinary into something menacing. What makes the film unforgettable is its message. Writer Everett DeRush and director Colin Eggleston crafted a story where the real antagonist is not a masked killer or supernatural force, but the natural world itself. The couple's selfishness and carelessness become their undoing, a sharp reminder that nature has its limits and its own ways of striking back. Long Weekend stands out because of its patience, its bleak mood, and the way it leaves you uneasy long after the final frame. It's not just a horror movie, it's a cautionary tale that feels more timely today than it did when it first hit VHS shelves. Night of the Lepus, 1972. Let's be honest, Night of the Lepus is legendary, and for all the wrong reasons. It's the ultimate cautionary tale of what happens when you decide to take a premise, giant, man-eating rabbits, and play it with the absolute straight-faced seriousness of a medical drama. The plot is classic mad scientist fodder. A couple of researchers, worried about the overpopulation of jackrabbits in the Arizona desert, decide to use hormone injections to speed up their reproductive cycle. Naturally, things go wrong, and suddenly the town is under siege by oversized bunnies. Here's the thing about this movie. The filmmakers actually tried. They didn't go for CGI monsters. They went for real, living, breathing rabbits. The issue is that whenever they cut to a giant rabbit, it's just a normal-sized bunny hopping over a miniature set in slow motion. The result is a bizarre, unintentional comedy that feels like a fever dream. When you see a rabbit attacking a screaming extra, you're not seeing a cinematic monster. You're seeing a fluffy creature clearly confused by the foam rubber on its fur and the fact that it's being poked by a crew member off camera. It's impossible not to love, though. It's a beautifully misguided relic of the 1970s. It stars heavy hitters like Janet Leigh and Stuart Whitman, who play their roles with such unwavering commitment that you almost feel bad for them. Night of the Lepus isn't a scary movie, but it is an essential experience for anyone who appreciates the wild, experimental, and frequently hilarious failures that only the 1970s could produce. If you love discovering forgotten horror and cult cinema, hit that like button and subscribe for more deep dives into the films time forgot. Thanks for watching, and remember, always be kind and rewind, because every movie is someone's favorite.